everybody. We're going to start off by welcoming our newest Planning Commission member, Justin Cochran, down here on the end. And he's joining us from the Board of Adjustments, but anyway, he's going to be in good hands. All right, we've got the minutes in front of you. What is your pleasure? You guys had any questions or?
I make a motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from last month's meeting. Okay. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Okay. All right. We have let's step back. Now we approved last month's meeting here. We did have a special call meeting last month on March 5th, and we'll need to approve the minutes on that one as well. You guys had a chance to review those?
Yeah, I'll make a motion, we approve.
Okay, we have a motion.
Who was that?
That was
Me.
Who made the motion?
I made
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes for the March 5th special call meeting. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. Okay. All right, we have a item here tabled from the March 25th meeting. We have review approval for a special use permit for adaptive reuse of existing Kmart building. Purpose consists of self-storage, U-Haul, trailer share, and related retail sales submitted by U-Haul, Americold Real Estate Company. Kevin, you got a staff report on you?
Sure. The report you have in front of you is for SP 18.11.160. This is a special use permit, basically to allow what we call an adaptive reuse of an existing big box retailer, Kmart. And right now they want to supplement that site. They want to provide some internal showrooms. They want to provide a shunting area, which is basically the outside hitching area where folks would come up and buy their items and have them installed on a vehicle, as well as outside display for a U-Haul facility. And the remaining square footage of the old Kmart building would essentially be utilized for internal units for self-storage. So there'd be some outside units as well as some inside units. As you stated, this was tabled for March 25th. This had more to do with administrative items for noticing. But at this point, right now, if you look in your report, we did have to make a revision, or at least I did, because the original plan didn't address some of the original report items that I had sent out to the Planning Commission. But since I received another plan, I did perform a second review. Essentially, a lot of the items that were not included in the first plan were addressed in the second plan, with the exception of several items that you'll see in your recommendation section of your report. The recommendation for the project is to approve it with conditions. Essentially, right now, you have some parking that's shown on the plan, but what we don't have is the number of individual storage units. And the only reason I bring that up is because you have ADA accessibility guidance, and for self-storage facilities, the thresholds for how many ADA accessible spaces you provide is determined by the number of self-storage units that you have. So if you look at the bottom, it's in parentheses, it's kind of hard to see, but if you have between 1 and 200 units, ADA guidance says 5%, but no fewer than 1 in terms of ADA accessibility. So your general idea of gross square footage being the normal thing that dictates how many parking is kind of different with self-storage units, because obviously the gross square footage isn't indicative of how many physical patrons are going to come. So that's why the ADA Access Board uses that as their means for deciding how many ADA accessible spaces they have. And of course, if you've got 201 units or more, it says it equals 10 plus 2% of the total number of units over 200. So that's an ADA option too, and that's not necessarily articulated on the site plan, but wouldn't necessarily be something that I would recommend holding up the project for. That's something that can be addressed prior to permits. Similarly, signage. Signage was something that I did not see on the plan. So aside from those two items, I am recommending approval with conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
This is a public hearing. Does anybody from the public have any comments or any questions? Commissioners, do you have any questions for Kevin? Do I hear a motion either way?
I move to approve.
And I second.
We have, okay,
Who's the motion?
Duffield and
Okay.
Subject to the conditions,
yes.
ADA.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve with conditions. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. Okay. All right, item number 4 here. Okay, we have a request to close a part of South Independence Avenue, right-of-way, beginning at northeast corner of Lot 10, Block 20. That's a Luker addition in the city of Russellville, Arkansas. And that's submitted by Emily and Lester Newland. Do you have a staff report on that one?
I'll be brief. This is on the north side of the 800 block of East 2nd Street. But essentially, it's the residue. It's that last remaining piece, if you will, that was not vacated in terms of the right-of-way. So it is a former right-of-way where the surrounding parcels no longer have right-of-way. So it's literally the donut hole, if you will. So from a planning standpoint, it doesn't diminish any of the planned or current street connectivity, and it isn't conflict with any of the zoning code or the future land use plan, and certainly not the master streets plan. So simply put, I would recommend approval.
Okay. All right. Commissioners, do you have any questions regarding this?
I'll make a motion to close the right of way.
All right,
Second.
we have a motion and a second.
Luke, who was the second? Luke?
We have a motion and a second to approve this request. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. All right, item number 5. Public hearing requesting review and approval to allow the use of a metal facade on Russell Family Funeral located at 2757 East Parkway, submitted by Susan Miller. Kevin, got anything on that?
Okay, your subject property is 2757 East Parkway. Susan Miller is the owner of the property. The business name is Russellville Family Funeral Home. This is a special use permit request. It's the approval of a non-standard, it's a non-standard commercial building is what the actual application is. There are design standards in the C2 zone that are in section 3.201. There's a list of materials that are allowed in the C2 zone, and when we say allowed, we're talking about the public right-of-way or the facades of a building in C2 that face the public road or a public alley or anything that's visible from the public road standpoint. And so in our regulations for C2, there's a series of materials that are listed. Metal is specifically omitted unless it's for trim and other non-facade type treatments. So this was the result of a materials change in the field. The general contractor did admit that they did make a materials change in the field. Staff did review this, and there were materials that were submitted to staff that was hardy plank. It's a cement board. It is an approved materials, but there was a field change. And so they're looking to see if the Planning Commission would entertain approving the materials and the way that they've treated their facility there with these materials under the intent of the regulations. Your report does have items 1 through 4. That is a derivative of section 3.203. Your report essentially says that this section provides you, the commission, with direction on how non-standard commercial building permits are to be reviewed. This is an after-the-fact review, so it's a little bit out of order, but the intent for the regs and what you all are supposed to look at are itemized 1 through 4 in your report. All in all, I'm making a recommendation that this request be approved. The existing use and the installation of metal materials is in keeping with the intent of 321 design standards in the C2 zoning district. I did make a site visit. I looked at the way that they use this material. Technically, our code isn't allowing materials such as metal, but then again, as we've seen out there, there can be metal that looks good to one person and doesn't look good to another person. But in terms of the overall character of the immediate area, I didn't see an issue with how they applied this metal material. And in actuality, in places where you've had provisions for a certain material, what they want to do is not have this mass of one material without any windows around any blank facades is kind of what people want to get away from. But they actually didn't do that. They actually did clad the bottom 20%, the foundation, where it meets the foundation with a stone material. They didn't have to do that either, but they chose to do that. So I think that helps address maybe some of the intent of the regs in terms of not allowing this kind of material. So that's my report.
I've made a site visit myself, and it's one of the nicer buildings on any in town. I mean, it really is. I mean,
Yep.
The contractor's, he's okay, I guess, but anyway. Yeah, I think the intent was to, was to keep the storage buildings or the steel buildings from going up like that. But I mean, it does, it's a good looking building. But, anyway, commissioners, do you have any questions for Kevin?
A comment on it. I was at the technical review, and I agree. I think the building looks great. I think it would be good for other contractors coming into the community if there was a provision for newer materials with the technology advances and different things, that we make it a little bit easier for newer materials to be presented that would be allowed under the code, and maybe not get into this situation. But that's more of a comment. But with that, I would move we would approve.
Okay, I agree with that 100%.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion.
Luke?
Are there any public comments?
I'm sorry?
Are there any public comments? This is listed as a public.
I'm sorry, this is a public meeting. Does anybody have any comments or questions or, from the public? Okay, all right, we do have a motion and a second. All those in favor all those in favor, acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. All right. Okay. Request to review and approve the revised preliminary plat for Brookview Estates Phase 5, which is eliminating Lot 10 located on South Seattle, submitted by Kirk Jones for William Thornsberry. Kevin, do you have a staff report on that?
Yes, I'll be brief. As you mentioned, this is a replat, a revision to an existing preliminary plat that was never finalized, essentially. Your graphic will show a series of lots, if you will, in cyan, and then you have that one that's in that more sea green, sea blue sort of color. That's the lot that they want to remove from the plat. Right now, that's Lot 10, but if they do that, they essentially, what I was saying in the comments is that they just need to redo the numbers so that you don't have a break in the lot series. That's all, before they go to recordation. Aside from that, there isn't anything that would conflict with the land use or the zoning or the long-term comprehensive planning. This is literally just a way for them to go past the prelim and get this thing finalized and remove it.
Okay. All right, commissioners, what's your pleasure?
Yeah, there is.
Is he? Oh, there he is. Okay, yeah. He's here.
Moving the lot, he's requesting to move the lot, we don't change the lot numbers.
We will, last.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions, any comments? No, not this one.
I make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Okay. And we have a motion and a second to approve the revised preliminary plat. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. All right, item number 7. Public hearing request for review and approval for a special use permit to operate a medical marijuana dispensary in a C2 for property located at 3506 South Arkansas, submitted by Attorney John Peel on behalf of 420RX Incorporated. Do you have a staff report on that?
All right, thank you. As you mentioned, this is at 3506 South Arkansas Avenue. The site is approximately 3.6 acres in total area. It is the applicant is John Peel. He is the attorney for the owner, Mr. Adam Harrison, of the company. This is a special use permit, the approval of a medical marijuana dispensary in a C2 zoning district. Right now, the current uses in zoning is vacant retail, commercial with a C2 zone, and the proposed use is actually a form of retail commercial, and the zoning is to stay the same. I cited Article 13 Table of Uses, and the ordinance specifically was 2279, adopted in June of 2007, that essentially allowed medical marijuana, that should be 17, not 07. My apologies. But the local cities and jurisdictions within the state of Arkansas were basically told under ACA statute that they had to find a way to approve this level of land use in their zoning ordinances because the state was allowing them to go through the licensing process for them. So that's what the city of Russellville did, and they treat them as they would a retail pharmacy, which is also stipulated under ACA statute. The subject property has been granted a medical marijuana dispensary license by the Arkansas Department of Health and is currently listed amongst those dispensary licenses through the state on the ADA website. Now, the site plan submitted by the applicant should provide a detailed parking analysis complete with calculations for parking required, parking supplied, notate and establish with staff any possible need for parking variance. And the only reason I mention that is because if you use the 1 per 150 square foot for retail establishment, the required number of spaces this facility would need is 55. That's a lot for a medical marijuana dispensary in my view. Presently, the site plan shows 15 standard spaces with two added ADA accessible spaces. I go on into the report to discuss right now, if you use the 2 spaces, it's basically a 2/3 metric, so 2 spaces for every 3 employees. At our TAC meeting, they essentially told us that they had about 12 employees. Well, that would equate to about 9 spaces for staff, and if right now they're providing 15, that would be 9 for staff and 7 for customers, plus 2 additional for ADA. And I think that type of arrangement would satisfy the site's conditions. So essentially what they're providing for now would satisfy aspects of our parking regulations. It's just we haven't had to deal with these particular types of uses before. So I'm essentially saying to approve this with conditions prior to the issuance of permits. The applicant should note on the plans all parking requirements which are to be established by this commission through discussion during our approval process. So because we've never dealt with these uses before, it's really up to us to have a discussion about what we have in our regs, what's sophisticated enough to handle this use and what's not. We just have to have a common sense approach of what we feel is adequate, and certainly the business owner feels like they have a handle on what their clientele would require and what their business needs are.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
This is a public hearing. If anybody from the public has any comments or questions, please feel free to step up to a microphone. Yeah, go ahead. And state your name for the record.
Hello, my name is Sharon Tucker, and this is my daughter, Rachel.
If you could pull your microphone down there. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Sharon Tucker, and this is my daughter, Rachel Campbell. We have lived in this area all of our lives and raised our families here. We are not public speakers, but today we are speaking for all medical cannabis patients, including our daughter and granddaughter, Maddie Campbell. who has suffered from epileptic seizures from the age of 18 months to now, which she's 9 years old. She was treated at Arkansas Children's Hospital with many prescriptions that did not stop her seizures. She needs the cannabis oil to hopefully stop her seizures. Cancer, epilepsy, MS, Parkinson's are just some of the few illnesses that can be helped with cannabis oil. This Russellville dispensary will absolutely be a life-saving facility for our children and all of us when we will need it. Our patients have waited and suffered too long. Please welcome and approve this dispensary. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? If you would state your name for the record.
Yes, Mr. Miller. My name is John Peel. I'm an attorney here in town, and I'm presenting on behalf of 420RX and Arkansas Limited Liability Corporation, the owners of which are here. Adam Harrison is actually the owner, and his stepfather, Jim Rankin, who actually graduated from high school the same year as me as a Morrilton Devil Dog, but he is assured that that will not be held against him. Essentially, all of you may know that the Arkansas Medical Marijuana Amendment was enacted in 2016. It passed statewide in Arkansas as well as in Polk County by a majority of the vote. It is the law. Under the amendment, the Alcohol Beverage Control Department of the state of Arkansas then was given control to issue licensures. The state was divided up into 8 zones. We have 4 dispensaries per zone. One of them has already been licensed by the state at 3506 South Arkansas Avenue, which is the old Vermeer building. These diagrams, one of which is upside down, are part of what was presented to the state so that the ABC could determine whether licensure was appropriate. It includes the security plan, the parking, the lighting, the traffic, and everything related to it. We also, of course, as Kevin's already pointed out, gone through staff review, and we've addressed, and in fact, have a proposal from Ira Weimer with Bob Hegel Architects for 45 spaces. If you'd like 45 spaces, we'll do whatever is required for the parking to be considered safe and appropriate for this use. I also have Kurt Jones here to address any issues from an engineering standpoint, or I can address any of the legal aspects that you may have, if any exist.
Commissioners, anybody from the public, anybody have any questions for Mr. Peel? This is a public hearing.
I have one question, just because I don't maybe understand it.
You're fine.
When we talked about the parking spaces and the numbers of employees,
Yes, sir.
I can see a business having 12 employees, but do they really anticipate having 9 there at a time? It just doesn't look like that kind of business, really.
No, it's just 9 total employees, and it's going to be shift work. You may have half of those there at any given time.
Okay, thank you.
What will the hours be?
What are the anticipated hours of use at? There isn't a licensure regulation for hours of operation. It's going to be daytime. It's not going to be open on Sunday. It's going to be Monday through Friday or Saturday.
Hey, Trey, question for Trey. What liability does the city have in conjunction with this dispensary?
I'm not sure I heard your question. What liability?
What liability, if any, do we have in conjunction with the dispensary?
Does the city have?
Yeah.
No, I don't think there's any. You just are standing here from a purely zoning or a special use permit, whether you believe that it's appropriate in the surrounding areas. But as for any type of liability tied with it, there's none, in my opinion.
And Mr. Lanier, you had also asked earlier a good question about the use of a pharmacist, and I went and got that cleared up for you. There isn't a pharmacist on premises, but there is a pharmacist required to be associated with each dispensary. The dispensary will require a prescription from an MD for a list of approved conditions, as Ms. Tucker indicated earlier. And then there is a pharmacist that's associated with it to ensure the proper dispensation of it. There's also a statewide software program that ensures that someone who comes to get a prescription filled at the Russellville location can't go down the road and get a prescription filled at Bluffton or Hot Springs or Conway or the next location. It's a statewide database, and it should be all tied in together.
John, security is always an issue with me. Part A, is there security requirements as far as from the state level? And B, have we at least met those requirements?
Yes, sir, and I don't remember if this is literally the security plan layout for the structure, which will require cameras and staffing, and you have to have a card to even get in premises. You have locked gates that you have to get through, and then there's even some biometrics involved.
Okay, thank you.
Those are all required by the state.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And we've met that at least as a minimum?
Yes, as a part of licensure, yes, sir.
How's the security for the clients that come up to the front door? Do they have to be buzzed in, or?
Yes, sir. On occasion, I'll defer to the owners because they've been going through this process for 2 years, but yes, sir.
So they don't just walk up and the door's open to push in?
There's controlled entrance, there's biometrics, there's a vault in the back where it's stored. Yeah, if you want to come up. Sure.
My name is Jim Rankin. My address is 1307 Main Street in Conway, Arkansas. Adam Harrison's my son. He can probably tell this as much as I can, but I was just closer to the podium. But you actually will come into a foyer, and in that foyer they have biometric system to where you are in a locked foyer until you show your medical card that permits you into the premises. So you are not able to even get into the inside foyer, which has another requirement. So there are actually 2 foyers before you even get into where the product will be sold. So you'll go through the first one. You'll have to prove that you have a medical card, that it's current, that you've got an ID that allows you to purchase the product. And then once that is determined to be correct, you are permitted to go into the next foyer, which is a waiting foyer, until there is room for you to come into the actual dispensary. Just as far as security, I think I counted 72 cameras that we're required to have on that inside and outside that building. So you won't make a move without it being covered by camera, recorded and kept, and that's all going to be required by the state. They've got that plan, and from what I understand, that they've already been dealing with the other dispensaries in the state. They're following that plan that's filed and some. So they take that plan, and that's really a starting point with the state. If they come inspect your facility and they say, well, we don't think that camera covers this area, they're requiring you to add another camera. So they are, it will be the most secure building in Russellville.
I have one other question then on, as a dispensary, what's the law allow as far as growing on site?
For a dispensary, the law allows you to have 50 mature plants at any one time, and I think the maximum that you can actually have in production is 150 maximum, but actual matured plants that you can change into product on site is 50. And that is, again, very secured. It's if you would look at that up close, it's cameras everywhere. You've got to have specific codes to be able to enter any room that has product. So you can't enter that room until that code has been pushed or a thumbprint has been taken. Each code, each thumbprint, of course, is going to be individual, so they'll know every person that steps into that room, when they do it, when they're out. It's a highly secure area.
I have one question. Let's say you have a patient comes in and gets some product or whatever, and they leave, okay? Is there any way of, I guess there's no way to police what they do after they leave? I mean, it's...
You know, it's what the police department faces every day in every city.
Right.
When they pull somebody over, if they have, and the state's learning too. They've followed with the other states. Currently, there are 33 states, I think, in the United States that have at least medical marijuana has been legalized. 10 states in the United States have done legalized recreational use marijuana, but all of that has just occurred over the past few years. So all states are still learning on how to deal with some of this. But you know, if they stop someone or they've found marijuana on a person, the first thing I assume that they're going to do, and again, I'm learning too, but where's your medical health card? And if you don't have a medical health card, it's just like they're busting you right now down the street. It's illegal, and they'll treat you just like they do. If you've got your medical health card, the next question will probably be, how much do you have? Because there is a specific amount that a person can have at any one time. There's a specific amount, maximum amount they can buy over any time period. And as John mentioned, if you buy it, and it's just like buying over-the-counter Sudafed anymore. If you buy it at Walgreens in Conway, and you come to Russellville and try and buy it in Russellville, they pull it up on the computer and they say, no, you bought it in Conway. You can't get any more. And that's the exact same way this will work.
And if I can add, the Arkansas Department of Health then promulgated like 59 pages of regulations on labeling and branding. So essentially, this is going to be just the same as if you go into the pharmacy and you get your hydrocodone after you've had your shoulder surgery. You know, that could be sold on the street if you wanted to, but you have to have it in a properly labeled and branded prescription bottle identified by the prescribing physician in exactly the same way. And if you have it on you and you don't have the prescription and the appropriate branding and labeling, then you're guilty of possession of marijuana, just like you're guilty of possession of hydrocodone without a prescription. It's exactly the same as a regular controlled substance from a pharmacist.
There'll be a date on that bottle when it was purchased, and just like
Yes.
you do prescription.
It'll look just basically like a drug bottle, but you go to the regular pharmacist. I mean, it'll be all the information, where you bought it, how much product was there that was in it to begin with, the date it was purchased, just the same.
And at the risk of beating that dead horse, until reviewing this request, I did not understand that dispensaries could raise any product. I thought it was all being shipped in. Raising it on site seems to me to open up a whole new inventory control security system.
And it does, and the state has set forth, how many pages? I mean, you just mentioned it a while ago. I mean, of rules and regulations that deal with that. And I've never grown the stuff. I don't know how to start now. I mean, we're business people. From what I have read in the regulations, and we've got some months to still learn everything in detail, but from what I've read in the regulations, you will actually have a serial number per plant. When that thing gets, I think, 6 inches tall, it's got to be labeled with a serial number. That serial number is marked, and the state follows that number, and it will know that number through production and where it goes. I mean, it is extremely detailed on what you can and can't do. So there won't be any going out the back door. If it is, somebody's going to jail. As you know from reading the papers, newspapers, television, this is a very serious topic that the state's undertaking. They're going to enforce it. They're not going to let something slide and say, oh, well, you're missing 2 pots this week. No, they'll shut us down in a heartbeat.
That growth is not outdoors. So
Yeah.
behind the lock gate, behind the two foyers, inside the metal building, there will be what's essentially a Scotty's trailer, which is going to be that metal box. Inside that metal box in the metal building will be the 50 labeled plants that'll be prescribed or actually registered with the state. And then there'll be literally artificial light and hydroponics inside for actual growth.
How often would someone come in and inspect to make sure there's 50 plants and not 200? I mean, is it-
And I couldn't tell you.
You
You
can
know,
tell me, I won't tell
again,
anybody.
they hadn't inspected the first one yet, so, but I have talked to owners of some of the other dispensaries, and when they come in with 10 agents, and they go through the place tooth and nail, and with a fine tooth comb. And like I said, even though we've supplied this diagram to the state with 72 cameras, and there's more technical stuff in there than I would ever understand. The other dispensaries did the same. When they came time to inspect, the inspectors would come through and say, well, we think you need to add this camera here, this protection here, this motion sensor here. And it's not, you don't step up and say, no, I'm not going to do that. You either do it or you're not going to have your license. So, I mean, they've taken it very serious, and it needs to be. And we're happy that they are. It takes, I mean, to speak of liability earlier, it takes some liability off of us when we're doing exactly what the state says, and it's extreme.
I would kind of assume that part of the security program is they're not going to tell you how often they're coming.
Right, yeah.
And that's true. They'll pop in. You know,
I was
it will
making sure
be.
somebody was popping in.
Yeah.
That's what.
And I'm sure it'll be just like your restaurants in town that serve alcohol. ABC sends someone in there that's underage with a fake license and tries to purchase. ABC is Alcohol Beverage Control is the organization that will be enforcing all these rules. So they're used to it. That's what they do. That's what they've done for years. And they're used to sneaking in, coming in, trying to catch you, trying to see what you're doing wrong so they can get you fined and get you straightened up. So I assume it will be the exact same thing, times 10.
I know y'all are always interested in joining landowners in any objections. I personally reached out to all of them. The only ones I couldn't talk to in person lived in Beaumont, Texas. But I did find a number for them, called them, and sent a letter, and it was received, I think, on April the 2nd. I have not heard from any landowner any registered objection.
I have back on security again. Who designed the perimeter property exterior lighting? Is there going to be anything done there? If so, who did it?
And I couldn't actually tell you who did it. They're in our packet. It was a group who did several different dispensaries in Arkansas. When it was time to start putting these packets together, you had several companies who had worked with marijuana distributors in Colorado, Arizona, other areas of the United States. Those engineers came in and provided their service. And honestly, I don't know if Adam, you remember their name, but it's the packet. It's in our original packet to the state, which was almost 400 pages of information. That's why I can't tell you off the top of my head.
The state looks at that, and that's also part of their
Yes.
specifications and requirements?
Yes, the packet that we had to send to the state, it was almost 400 pages. It went in detail how the product would be grown, how it would be manufactured, how it would be distributed, packaged. It goes into the security detail, lighting detail. It's a lot of reading.
It did address exterior perimeter lighting?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I mean, yeah. And if you can get a little larger view of the security plan, it's got exterior lighting surrounding the building. If it's something, again, if the state shows up and says you got a dark corner, I guarantee you they're going to make us put a light in.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody from the public?
I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Adam Harrison. I'm the owner of the dispensary here. A little bit of history about myself. We come from a real estate development and management background in Conway. We develop subdivisions, we build rent houses, we build commercial strip centers and apartment complexes, own and manage them ourselves. We run a very professional and well-respected business in Conway. I think we're a huge asset to the community of Conway, and I also look forward to being an asset to Russellville and the surrounding communities here. So, the company that did the surveillance was Genesis Datacom. I have their information if y'all want to reach out to them. They did all the biometrics and the surveillance system, if y'all would like that. I just wanted to introduce myself, let y'all know who I was.
All right. Anybody else?
Say one more thing.
Okay.
I just met this lady just now. We didn't ask her to come out. I asked her how she found out about it. She said she found out about it on Facebook. That's our granddaughter that she's here. But we've been, Adam's phone number got put on the application, of course, and it's his mobile phone, and it's rang off the hook with people from the community. I mean, I don't know if you've tried to call him, but several people have called, and there's a lot of people out there this is going to help. A lot of people like this lady and her children.
Anybody else? Okay. Kevin, you got it?
Seeing as I saw the site plan that they had shown you all with the 45 parking spaces, if they feel that that's something that their business needs, I think that's a discussion we should have with them. I'm new to these types of uses. The one thing the commission may want to consider is the fact that we have a license that's been issued by the state. That's the use that they're proposing here. The zoning is C2. But what if later on down the road that use ceases to exist? Would you want that site to have more parking later as a quote-unquote improvement? Or would you rather have it less parking today and then have whatever comes in later, if something comes in later, have to improve it themselves? You come closer to meeting today's square footage metric, but in most cases, 1 per 150 square feet, it's a very, very blunt instrument in terms of measuring how much parking you should have. So that's for you all to consider. So they have a plan with 45 spaces, and they have a plan that they initially submitted with 15.
I can say that I would, go ahead, Kurt. No, go ahead.
Comment about the
Yeah.
parking. The 16 or 15 that are on there right now, those are existing stripe spaces. The plan showing 45 actually doesn't add any pavement to the site. It's existing pavement that's out there, and it would just simply be a matter of restriping. In reality, we're just talking about painting lines on the existing pavement. My suggestion would be to start out with a minimal amount. If they need more, they could certainly add them. But I think that an appropriate amount for this type of use would be somewhere in that 15 to 20 space range. We use the guideline of 1 per 150 square feet for retail. Well, in reality, only roughly 3,000 feet of this facility is going to be retail. And based on that, you're only talking about 20 spaces. So,
Right.
but I just wanted to point out that they're not proposing, coming out here and adding any pavement. It's, they've got enough pavement out there right now that they could stripe that for 45 spaces.
Okay, thanks, Kurt. Anybody else have any questions or any comments at all? Mr. Mayor, you have anything to add here, or you good? Okay. All right. Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
I move it be approved. think with the, if it's 3,000, whatever the regulations say per code, if it's 3,000 of retail, whatever number of spaces are that fit that to start with under our code.
Well, they would have to
So
meet
is that
50.
15 or 20 or whatever
It-
that is?
They'd,
10?
they'd have to have 55 spaces if you wanted to use the gross square footage that they have today.
Just
so
of
they'd-
the retail, not the gross square footage.
Well, they would need to divide that space up and provide us with how much of it's actually the retail portion and how much is the warehouse, right? How much is it the back area? I don't know what that breakdown is. So if you wanted to truly be by the 150 metric for retail, they would simply have to resubmit plans to us, not necessarily to the commission, but with that breakdown. And they certainly have the space to do that.
That's a motion.
I think that's my motion, yeah.
Okay. All right, we have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion. We have a motion and a second to approve the special use permit for the medical marijuana dispensary. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Item number 8. Public hearing to review and approve a special use permit to operate an automobile maintenance and mechanical repair in C2 for property located at 1415 East Main Street, submitted by Judy Bailey and Robert Edwards. Kevin, you got a staff report on that?
Okay.
Sir? No, go ahead.
I do. I just want to make sure I didn't forget my report.
You guys don't have to rush off. The rest of this is going to be good. Go ahead, Kevin.
Well,
Hey, Kevin, if you would pull that mic down just a little bit.
I'm looking for my report for 1415 East Main.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Laquita, do you have a copy of the report for 14 East Main?
Bear with us just a minute.
I can speak to the site pretty well without having my formal report. I do apologize. Somehow it did not get printed.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. No, I can pull it up in my email. Let me make sure I have it. I don't. See, here's your plan. I apologize. Okay. Well, if you don't mind, I can speak to it from here. Just recommending conditional approval anyway. Thank you, sir. Okay.
All right. How we doing, Kevin? Good? Okay.
We can do a report.
Brian, are you, yeah.
All right, folks. The next item on the agenda, as you mentioned, this is a public hearing requesting review and approval for a special use permit to approve an automobile maintenance and mechanical repair shop in a C2. The property is at 1415 East Main Street. This is submitted by Judy Bailey. Now, the parcel in question here is on the north side of Main Street. And if you'll see in your review packet, you have those existing buildings that are in quite bad shape. Two of them are in disrepair, and one of them is in some, it's in some need of some revitalization. So the applicant is essentially proposing to build is it a Meineke or a Midas? Or is it? Pennzoil. It's a Pennzoil automotive repair shop. It's going to have 3 fast lube lanes. It's going to have ingress and egress on the west side of the parcel coming in off Main Street, and essentially a circular pattern. So you would pull in off the roadway, and then you would pull into the main area at the back. The back area isn't going to be used so much for servicing vehicles for oil, but more storage of materials, maybe doing some ancillary repairs, but essentially being more of an oil change, lube, filter type of establishment. So you would have this one way in, and then you'd have all the vehicles basically facing in a southerly direction as they exit out onto Main Street. So essentially the use is permitted, but you have to have a special use permit in order to do so. So at this time, the staff report is essentially recommending conditional approval. We want to make sure that they have all of their parking articulated the same way that I do most of my other reports, is that we break down the exact amount of use for the number of bays versus the retail space versus storage, so that we're not what I would call over-parking the site. And a lot of that can be handled, not necessarily here, but we can handle that at permit.
Okay.
But the use does not appear to be out of character with the area at all.
Okay. All right. It is a public hearing. Does anybody have any comments or they want to make in regards to this request? Commissioners, do you have any questions for Kevin?
Will these be new structures, or is this, they're gonna remodel, refinish the existing?
Oh, they'd be new. I think they're going to rehabilitate that back masonry building. Is that correct?
The 2 buildings on the front will be just demolished.
No, okay.
And then the back building, the large building, it will be refurbished and cleaned up.
Okay,
But the new structure, there'll be a new structure on the front.
all right, thank you.
And I actually had
All right.
Been there long?
Well, I'm sitting here trying to figure out how he's gonna do it. Because I saw those 3 exit lanes.
Oh, nice.
On another question, have you been in touch with the highway department to see if this driveway layout matches up with what they will allow?
We have, and we're not gonna change the curb cuts. We're just gonna attach to what's already existing there, so it lines up fine.
Okay,
Kind of design the building around that.
good, okay. Some people don't think of that ahead of time.
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
Now, we did have a question or a comment in the staff report about sewerage. I think that was a utilities question that we had. So you guys have a septic system, or you have an existing access to sewer line?
So there is no sewer on the property existing, but there is sewer, only about 375 feet to the west.
Okay.
We have approval for behind it.
So you will be able to tie into public sewerage. Do you know if there's a legacy septic system on site?
I can answer that question. I've been working with the real estate agent and both of the property owners. Jamie Souls has agreed to grant a sewer easement. He already has sewer on the property there, so it's not to his advantage, but he's agreed to do that.
Okay.
The next property, which joins this property in between, they don't have sewer. But they have just agreed yesterday or last week that they're going to go ahead and also grant that because it benefits their property.
Sure.
They're not having to pay for it, so they're going to grant the easement. So we developed the easements this afternoon, and I sent them to the real estate agent he's going to get the signatures.
And you already are tying into public water, and that's immediately accessible?
Public water is right in front.
Right there?
It's got a 12-inch right there, right behind the sidewalk.
And I guess the last question I would have is about your on-site septic and disposal system, if there was ever any old legacy septic system.
As far as I know, I've been through those buildings, I haven't found, seen, I don't know what they were doing, but.
Okay.
I would be surprised if we found outhouses behind them, but instead of a septic system. They're old.
Literally floor to ceiling, front to back, full of machinery and debris. So
Right.
there's
you may want to benefit yourself just by doing a little bit of some work. You've already acquired, right? So I don't know if your title, you may want to investigate ADH permits just to see if there's anything back there that's ever been permitted for. It's unlikely, but you may want to look at that.
Before we move on, we're lucky to have Jimmy Lynch. Jimmy, you got something to say about all this? You're the man.
There's a couple of issues there that I need to discuss with them because this is some things that we're not doing now that are done. There's a trailer to the north of them and Davis Smoke Shop there to the north of them.
Right.
And their water meters are between the highway and these buildings. So that's gonna be some things that are not allowed to be done today that we're gonna have to deal with in the future. I didn't realize that they hadn't bought the whole property until sitting here right now. They didn't get the trailer that's to the north of them there, Davis Smoke Shop there. So I thought that was all one piece of property. So that kind of throws a little wrinkle into it. It's not something we can't figure out.
It's not something that would impede the permitting process right here.
Maybe speaking out of turn, but I don't see anything that would preclude us from making it happen.
Okay.
Think it'd be appropriate to have that as a condition?
Not at the special use permit level. I mean, I can't tell the commission what to exact, but I think that can be handled administratively at the permitting end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
Make a motion to approve.
Okay.
What was that? Was that Jim?
Yeah.
I'll second.
Luke?
Luke?
Yeah. All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the special use permit. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Okay. Item number 9. Public hearing requesting review and approval of a special use permit to operate a jet ski and boat repair in a C2 property located at 305 North Arkansas Avenue, submitted by Troy Moret.
Okay, so the property, the subject property before you now is at 305 North Arkansas Street. Mr. Muret is the applicant. I do not believe the applicant owns the property. I believe that they're going to lease the space that's currently there. There's an existing building that resides on the property. It's a vacant retail with C2 zoning, and the proposed use would be a continuation of commercial retail. I simply cite table of permitted use for auto repair garage. It's a special permit in a C2 zone, as we've seen with other items on tonight's agenda. The specific request is to improve the interior of the existing commercial building to house jet ski and boat repair. They also intend to utilize some of the outside area as staging for vessels, whether they be jet skis or boats. I'm not exactly sure. The applicant could probably provide some clarity for that, but they do want to use some of the outside area for outside display of some of these watercraft. The comments are fairly specific because they go down a litany of things that would be necessary to bring them, to a full review, and it gets into detailed items such as parcel numbers. You can read the list before you, but these were items that I did not necessarily see on the site plan that I was provided. And then there's another section that speaks to, more of a permits for occupancy. And an SISD letter as a substantial improvement / substantial damage. Substantial improvement and substantial damage are NFIP requirements, National Flood Improvement Program, because the property resides in a floodplain. So in order for one to stay the way they are and not bring it up to current NFIP standards, they would have to demonstrate that the value of what they're doing today, what they're proposing to do, doesn't exceed 50% of the value of the structure itself. This is not including the value of the land. It's just, let's just say the structure's worth 10 grand and they want to do $10,100 worth of improvement, then they would have to bring that property up to current NFIP standards if it isn't already. But you have to go through that process to verify substantial improvement or substantial damage. In this case, there's no flooding event that sustained damage per se, it's substantial improvement. So I wanted to make sure that the board was aware of that comment. So that's why that comment sits in your report. And that's something that the floodplain administrator for the city and myself have talked about. There's another item that's not in your report that I did discuss with staff before tonight's meeting. The Army Corps of Engineers and the city are currently in an executed agreement, which is about 2 years old at this point, to acquire this property eventually. And they're going to acquire it amongst some others for what we call stream bank restoration. This whole area is in a flood zone, and a portion of the building actually on this property is grazed by the floodway. It's that area that FEMA says the water actually goes. And if you all have ever been down there during an event, you know where that water goes. So this use could eventually cease and desist just by virtue of property acquisition through the Army Corps of Engineers and the city anyway. Now, the applicant today does not own this property. They're leasing this space potentially, and they just want to have a place for their business use. So we wanted to make you all aware of that. So even if you were to grant the use, that's all well and good, but inherently that use could just go away eventually just by virtue of acquisition. So the recommendation is to approve it conditioned upon verification of the items commented in the report. So you have two sections, one for site plan revisions, which are pretty straightforward, and the other one really has to do with certificate of occupancy. That gets into the SISD issue that I talked about improvements, but also another thing I didn't mention is anchoring of anything that they're going to be staging outside. Since it is in a floodplain, we do not want a flooding event to happen and then have the potential for watercraft essentially floating away. It's kind of ironic that they're watercraft, but we would recommend that they be anchored.
I have a question. I don't see the dimensions on the property itself, on any of these paperwork that I have, the actual dimensions of the surface. It takes quite a bit of space to park jet skis and boats.
It's only gonna be jet skis, there's no boats. The permit requires us to put the boat in there. It's only jet ski requirements, that there's no zone, there's no boat.
Where are you gonna park them?
It's gonna be by appointment only, okay? And there is, whatever will not fit in the shop will not be on site.
So there won't be any jet skis parked up along the main,
Well, no,
seven.
there's gonna be display models outside, like the PWC place across the street does. We'll have some skis outside for sale, but they will be kept in the building at night or off-site in the building. But there won't be anything out there.
So all the things you're working on are not gonna be piled outside around the building?
No, there will be nothing outside of the front hall. And on the site plan, we have it set up for the anchors and the cabling that's required for the system.
And you understand this zoning may go away eventually?
Yeah, Mr. Moore owns that, Tony Moore owns that property, and we've had that conversation. When that happens, he's gonna move us somewhere else. We've already had all that conversation.
So will there be something shown on the final approved plans that says there's no outside storage overnight or something like that?
I thought that was part of the, I don't know if that's on the site plan, but that was the conversations I've had with the commission, that there would be nothing.
The board would stipulate that this evening. We can run down the list of stipulations. If it's not written in your report in front of you, you all have the discretion to add that verbally on the record, and that we would make that applicable. But I did want to make sure that we were clear on outside storage versus outside repair. My understanding from this discussion that there wouldn't be any.
There won't be no repairs or storage outside. It won't look, other than a couple of display skis that are ready to go to be sold like a new product, there will be nothing outside. It will all be inside. That inside that building is all shop. There's a small area for an office, the rest of it's shop. It'll probably hold 6 or 8 skis.
Do the displays stay outside overnight, or do you move them back in?
They'll be brought out in the morning while we open, brought in during the evening. We don't want anything stolen, so.
Good idea.
No, there won't be anything left outside
And if you have an old hull that's not gonna be used, you've got a place to haul it to.
Yes, we have a secondary site outside Ingo. So if there's anything, let's say for two people showed up at night, don't have anywhere to go, we can move it to the secondary site. That's not an issue.
So does the commission want to limit outside display to certain hours of operation and limit the number of vessels? Or do you want to leave it open?
Is reasonable number 2?
I'm gonna say the most we're gonna have out there for display is 3 on the east side and 3 on the north side, at the most. And again, that will only be during hours of operation.
For the record, you are, what's your name?
My name's Troy Murray.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So that's a total of 6 during business hours of outside storage?
And these are displays that are ready to be sold.
Correct.
They're not
Correct.
junkers.
No, they are ready for the consumer.
Okay. And your name is Troy or Tony?
Troy, T-R-O-Y.
Because I've got Tony on my paperwork here.
Yeah, I see that in some of the pictures. Troy.
So we'd be limiting outside storage to daylight hours, total of 6, and they all must be operable. That's what I'm hearing.
Okay. Y'all happy?
Okay. Anybody else? Commissioners?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Karen, was that you?
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the request for the special use permit. All those in favor, acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. All right. Got a little bit of housework to do here. We've got a request to nominate an at-large member of the Planning Commission to serve on the Board of Adjustments to fill the vacancy of Lannis Nicholson. Nomination will need approval by City Council. This is, if you guys want to move to table this while we, this was brought to us kind of late, so if you guys want to table, somebody wants to move to table this, we
I
can do that.
move to table.
Okay.
Second.
I'll second.
We got a motion and a second to table.
Down by the end, who was it?
That's Luke. We have a motion and a second to table the nomination for the vacant spot for Lannis Nicholson on the Board of Adjustments. All those in favor, acknowledge by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Okay. All right, we've got a request here to, well, I guess it's a request to appoint member of Planning Commission to serve on the Board of Adjustments to fill vacancy for Steve Hubbard. Confirmation, City Council is required for this appointment. The City Council has already approved, if I'm not mistaken, is that correct? Has already approved Justin Cothran? Okay, all right. Okay. We welcomed Justin Cothran a while ago, and he has volunteered to serve on the Board of Adjustments. But we need to move to put him there.
I make a motion
Okay. Charborough?
to put Justin Cothran on the Board of Adjustment.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right. We've got a motion and a second to appoint Justin Cothran to the position of, for the Planning Commission. It's the Planning Commission position of the Board of Adjustment. That's kind of a tricky one. I'll explain that one in a minute, but anyway, it's, we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. He was on the Board of Adjustments at an at-large position, and Steve Hubbard has left us, and Justin has resigned that position, and he's taking the Planning Commission position. Three Planning Commission members can be a member of the Board of Adjustments, and then you have 2 at-large members, so that's basically what we've done. We've cleaned that up. I will announce here that the Planning Commission meeting for May is scheduled for May 20th, which is the third Monday of the month, not the fourth, due to Memorial Day being the following week. So put that on your calendars. The submittal deadline will be for the May 20th meeting is April the 30th. So if anybody has any questions about that, just call Laquita. And is there any other business?
We're going to have 2 at-large members to be nominated next month, so.
That's
everybody
right.
kinda get their heads
Yeah.
together and let's try to bring
I stand corrected there. There is 2 spots. I'm sorry about that. There is 2 at-large positions on the Board of Adjustments that are going to be needing to be filled. So
Only have one on this. Do we have one
no, we,
to be filled?
you, I, and Justin are the 3.
But I mean, what about the one that's empty right here by me?
That's we're talking about Board of Adjustments.
Right.
That's the 2 at-large ones
Okay.
there.
Sorry.
So anyway, no, it's okay. All right. Okay. All right. If there's no other business, we are adjourned.
So,